on the situation. Joining us right now is Dr. Michael Ogu. He's a senior lecturer at the University of Babcock, Department of Political Science and Public Administration. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having me, Millicent. Good evening.
Good evening. It's been 100 days since Russia invaded Ukraine. How would you describe these 100 days?
Well, I think, there are so many horrible ways to describe it, but I think it's been 100 days of chaos, 100 days of uncertainty, because there's really no end in sight, from what we hear from the two parties, there's really no end in sight. So it's a very blurry vision that we see from here. And it's just unfortunate that this is the situation. But it is 100 days of uncertainty, as I've said before.
And if we look at what we've seen, witnessed, heard throughout these 100 days after launching what Russia is calling special military operation, the Kremlin leaders seem to have expected the government in Kyiv to fall quickly. If you remember the first few weeks, Moscow even called on the Ukrainian military to rise up and, overthrow the Ukrainian leadership, but that didn't happen. Do you think that Ukraine will ever remain the same?
Well, no, I don't think Ukraine will ever remain the same because, just a few days ago, the ICRC, in the International Red Cross Committee, described the war as a chaos, basically, an incomprehensible chaos, and so it is obvious that Ukraine is basically a shadow of itself now, and Ukraine will never be the same again in terms of infrastructure that has been lost, the brain drain that has resulted from this conflict. People have had to leave almost in their millions, so that is on the one hand, and of course on the other hand, if Ukraine eventually wins the war, then of course there's going to be an entire shift in the power dynamics within Eastern Europe, and the same if Russia also wins. So there's just a lot of issues that are at this point are looking very complex, and really there's no explanation. There's no clear explanation on how things would pan out in the near future. But it is unfortunate that this is the situation now. There seems to be a stalemate, which is not helping. Which is not helping at all, especially for Ukraine, which is on the receiving end of all of this violence and attack. So yeah, I don't think Ukraine will ever remain the same again.
I was going to say that if we rewind back to maybe the second month of this invasion, when Russia decided to pull out from all the other major cities and then said that it was focusing on the east, if it didn't do that, what do you think would have happened between both countries with this invasion?
Yeah, so of course, there has been the argument that, the Russian invasion focuses on the Donbas region, with Donetsk and Luhansk as the focus, of this invasion. But we could see that in the initial stage, it appeared that the attack was, just all around Ukraine. It appeared that the Ukrainian government was about to be seized by Russian invasion, by the Russian military. But I think that focusing, I think that the Russian campaign, the Russian goal in this invasion is beyond the Donbas. I think that Russia has more interest beyond that eastern region, but of course, with the weight of the sanctions that they have received, the pushback that they have received from the West, from the EU and other allies, they don't want to push their luck too far, and so that I think is what informed them withdrawing from all these other regions and sticking to the eastern region of Ukraine, But that as it may, even if they succeed if they conquer the eastern region, I think that if something is not done, in terms of the responses from EU, and if Russia is allowed to win this war and seize the eastern part of Ukraine, I don't think they're going to give up at that point. I think they will ask for more, in the near future. So there's just a whole lot that at play, and sadly, people are going to reply to this, but that's the situation on ground.
And the pleas from Kyiv for more weapons from the West are constant, from President Zelensky, the Defense Ministry. But the U.S. recently made very clear that the longer-range missiles they will provide are not for hitting Russian territory. It fears an escalation. Moscow says, the U.S. and other countries are adding fuel to fire. But some people, like the Baltic republics, have voiced frustration over what they are calling as the West's reluctance to give Ukraine everything it needs. Is this valid?
Well, I don't think the West can give Ukraine everything that it needs, right? Because if that were the case, then of course the West, and EU will also allow Ukraine to come into NATO and all of those other things, which we have seen how they played out in the past. So the idea of giving Ukraine all that they need is far-fetched. But we see that US, EU, the UK, all these allies, all these authorities are on the side of Ukraine, are doing as much as possible that they can to support Ukraine, and also not escalate the war beyond what it already is. So all the continued support, military support that is provided to Ukraine is what has kept Ukraine this long in the conflict in the first place, because without this level of military support, that Ukraine is receiving, I think Ukraine would have fallen a long time ago to the Russian forces. So that is what's keeping Ukraine up. And I think that also, the West is trying to make a statement, not allowing Russia to get away with this kind of bullying, as some will call it, because if that happens, then it means that democracy, it is basically a spit on the face of freedom and democracy and all of that. So I don't think that the West would give Ukraine all that they need, even though perhaps they might want to do that, but they wouldn't want to like you just said, add fuel to the fire and let this war prolong beyond what we can already see on the ground. So I think that so far Ukraine is receiving as much support as they can get, with the circumstances that are currently on the table.
And for some analysts, they're saying that Russia will be able to take over the eastern parts, especially Severodonetsk, in the next 2 weeks. But a lot of people disagree and still reacting based on whenever they get more weapons. But let's move over to the negotiations, talks between Russia and Ukraine. They started up soon after Russia's invasion. There were several rounds of negotiations, but they didn't produce any agreement. Are we left with the decisions on the battlefield as it stands?
Well, perhaps yes and no. Yes, in the sense that so far, because all the talks so far have not yielded any positive outcome. It appears that factors like the food crisis that is currently ongoing, humanitarian issues that have resulted from the war, and all these things would push states to, or would basically push these other allies, the UN and co, to force Russia and Ukraine to come to the negotiation table and sort this thing out. So all these perhaps, even though they are not necessarily, war issues, but they are also issues that have resulted from the war that is ongoing. And I think that those are things on the battlefield that can help to bring about negotiation. And no, in the sense that, of course, we could see, like you mentioned earlier, that the African Union is already coming into the question. So it appears that the war between Russia and Ukraine is already extending even beyond Europe, and Africa is beginning to feel the heat. So the longer the war continues, or the longer the invasion continues, the more actors are affected, the more states are affected by this, and of course, the more pressure would be on both parties, Russia and Ukraine, to talk and sort this out. So I don't think that that there's completely, it doesn't appear that all hope is lost in terms of peace talks, but eventually they're going to get to that point. It's just that we don't know when. And of course, we can only see, or we can only tell as events continue to unfold on the battlefield, and of course, in negotiation rooms too. Of course, we could see the efforts that Turkey is making too, to help fast track the conversations, negotiations between these two parties. And I think that I think that Turkey, is being very strategic about their negotiation or their involvement in the conflict, because they have not imposed any sanction on Russia, and they have also continued, or they have also provided some support to Ukraine in the past, so it is all just very, very strategic and very diplomatic to put themselves in a position where they can still, mediate, between these two parties, so, and perhaps we'll see more of these things continue, especially as the war lingers, because it can't last forever, obviously.
We definitely hope not, and most especially the people of Ukraine who are bearing the brunt. We appreciate your time. Thank you so much, Dr. Michael Ogos, the Senior Lecturer at the University of Babcock, Department of Political Science and Public Administration. Always a pleasure having you join us.
It's always a pleasure, yeah. Thank you very much for having me.